lights in the trees, a trick of the frost, a ghost on the breeze. But I saw a mirror older than me, staring through time like it wanted to speak. The forest went silent, the world held its breath. Something was watching beyond life and death. We stepped through the green, boots breaking the seal, not chasing a light, but something too real. I came back with salt on my skin, my mind split wide where the storm got in. They call it a test, but I know the deal. History blinks beneath the green veil. Yeah.
And good evening, everyone, and welcome to our recap of Chapter 2, as well as our preview for Chapter 3. I'm joined with John Burrows and, of course, Commander Cobra, who is the host of, a co-host, actually, of UAP Crossfire, which airs Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, along with Don Ecker, Chris DePerno, and Dan Carlson. And, of course, John Burrows. How are you guys doing tonight?
Great. Outstanding.
I'm excellent.
All right, so we're going to get into it in a few seconds, but I just want to give special thanks and credit to the content creator of this, Keith Kerlock. Great work that he's done to put this all together for this 22-chapter series. And here's one of his websites right here, Becks Creek Soundscape Studio. So it's at bcss.rocks. Also, YouTube. You can see it at Rose City Sound Project. A lot of the music that is part of this series is there. It's extraordinary music. And as we were talking before we came on the air, John specifically was talking about frequencies in music. And John, go into that a little bit.
Well, it goes back to the simplest way to look at it is the government realized the frequencies. At a certain point, they started realizing that they can affect a lot of different things. And one of the first people that worked on it that's been declassified was a guy by the name of Persinger. And he worked with these main people that have been working on all this technology. And what they learned was the test that they ran was they built this helmet. And actually a guy earlier than that by the name of Chuck Nicaro, who ended up working at the Office of Net Assessment, he's done a piece called The Soft Wars, but he did a piece way back when he worked for CNN. And they actually showed that he could be in one room and a message could go through him through the frequencies to his mind. So it's still on YouTube. You can watch it, where he did a special report. I think it was 2 parts, where frequencies can affect almost like telepathy. Well, Persinger's work, which you can look it up, called The God's Helmet, that actually they took a group of people, and I think it was 8 or 9 of every 10, when they had the frequency, when the helmet was put on and they manipulated the mind, they came back saying they thought they saw God. Hence the call of it being called the God's Helmet. So frequencies can affect your mind and your mood just like music can. And what people don't understand is the music they used to say has subliminal messages in it, but it really does. Because depending on how these frequencies in the music and the chords affect you, it can put you in a different mindset. There was a song called We Built This City on Rock and Roll. And then they said Marconi built the Mamba. Listen to the radio. Don't you remember? We built this city on rock and roll. Well, anyway, that was the radio became the manipulation of the mind.
Well, before we continue, I also want to say thank you to both of you for your service to our country and the sacrifices you and your families also had with you guys doing what you do. But, Commander, with your exceptional military background, what is the importance of frequencies in that kind of context as far as military?
Let's step back just a tiny bit.
Okay.
First of all, everything that we do requires a frequency to lock in our equipment, be it radios, radar, even subsystems now, and that's probably 10 to the 10th power when you talk about some of the new systems that we have out, because everyone will tell you the only way that this works in the future battlefield, and I think that we're well past that in the discussions that we're having with John, requires it to be networked. To be networked, you have to have frequencies, you have to have proper ability to lock into that frequency and then interpret what the signal is. What John is pushing along in this series and what he's talking about is the realization that we are probably 2 or 3 leaps past what we traditionally think. So when people talk about we're going to occupy a particular part of the spectrum, which is probably the biggest battle that goes on between the military, the commercial part of it, is the use of the spectrum. And I'm talking radio, TV, radar, all those things that are in there. The evolution of bringing on 4G, 5G networks into so that our cell phones work. There are things going on past that, but that is the kind of demand that is out there right now for frequency. You take a couple steps back, up, out, and try to absorb what John's saying. What he's written about, what's coming up in this series is we are talking about being opened, tuned, brought to the proper place to receive and interact with the message. One of the things that's really important about when you talk about Marconi, and there's always that favorite joke of mine that when you hear pilots, I think Top Gun Maverick was the latest one that did it, wherein he's in the aircraft and he starts making believe that he can't transmit properly on the radio. He purposely fouls up the call. There's a joke about that Marconi invented that 15 minutes after he invented the radio, because it's a manipulation. You don't want to acknowledge that you're being told to do something different than you want to do. I
What
think early, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, no, continue your finish your thought, Commander.
Early on, I think people thought that this was a one-way medium, a one-way transmission, that people would receive signals to a radio set, and it would then they would react to it. That there was, this was a very finite. It's not. And what's happened over the last probably 4 or 5 decades is the ability to demonstrate that we can now tune frequencies, send the signal out that is having major biological, psychological effects. And that's prevalent in weapon systems. That's prevalent in how we're controlling weapon systems inside aircraft. This is what's going to allow, if we continue to function in the type of aircraft we're working with, where G forces are a factor, you're going to be able to control with your mind. Mindscape was a really good movie that explained that. They came up with a way that allowed them to use brain waves, brain interaction, connection, again, via frequency, that allowed them to manipulate the physical aspects of this world that we're in. In our case, maneuvering an aircraft or some other kind of activity that was going on. So, you look like you have a question, Bill. Go ahead.
I was going to say, because you just touched on it, what I was going to ask you, the weaponization of frequency. Would you classify the use of microwaves as a frequency? Look what happened in Cuba with that incident. Would you classify that as?
Sure, but I mean, in that same spectrum of the that same piece of the spectrum, a frequency spectrum, microwave is used as John was talking about. The death ray was the what started during World War II. The microwave oven came out of that because an engineer, as the colloquial story goes, had a chocolate bar in his pocket of his jacket. He was close to a microwave emitter, and it caused that chocolate to start to melt in his pocket. And that's what they started to think of. So now you're doing that to activate what's happening in a microwave oven. You're using radio frequency to cause kinetic activity on the cellular level that causes things to cook, heat up. You have microwave that's being used as the end function for aircraft especially, but even on other applications, ships and undersea ships, that you can use it to actually see by painting the picture in front of you so that you can tell if there's obstacles there. That's just one tiny slice of the spectrum that's out there. What you're alluding to is the Havana ray, which caused, we have weapon systems that we have put on ships and others that cause a burning or an itching sensation to cause people to turn away from coming towards a ship or a land assembly. That is tinker toys compared to what we actually probably have going on. Again, no disclosure of anything that I've seen, but I know the things that when we put out on very basic levels, what is a capability, what you see in a presentation, we are, no pun intended, light years past whatever you're going to see in the public forum.
This is the next Manhattan Project on steroids, and people
Yes.
don't realize it.
And we're deep into it.
And John Alexander was involved in all this. It's called non-lethal weapons. But if you notice, Lou Elizondo over and over said this pertains to the Havana syndrome, but he never elaborated when it does come back to frequencies and what Alexander was working on, which was the Los Alamos. And then it also goes deeper. The F-35 helmet, the reason why the F-35 is so special is because of the helmet. They came out and admitted that early on because the F-35 would lose the dogfights at the 15 and 16, but that was before the pilot got the helmet. And they said all along the helmet would be a game changer for this type of technology.
And I will add, John, there did a very important part to that part of that story. The F-15, F-16 fighting the F-35, the version that they used for that fight, those face-offs, was not designed to do air-to-air work. It was an early prototype in the test program. It did not have the enhanced helmet. The helmet that you use in the F-18 strike fighter, as well as the F-15, I guess it's the E model as well, basically is around $450,000. That's how much the helmet costs.
Wow.
And I think back to the times that I dropped helmets of mine over the years, what that would have meant, in the cost of operations with Commander Cobra, getting a helmet like that, banging it accidentally. My point being is that helmet and that interface falls directly into what John is talking about. And I think it's a legacy of John's experience and what's coming up in this series, that we are looking for practical applications. And I don't think it's nearly anywhere near the highest form of the art. I think that this is what I was saying when we had our last get together. We are taking concepts, we are applying quantum type physics to a more mechanical world that we are. We're trying to get whatever edge we possibly can in any spot that we can to cut down any amount of time, any kind of lack of interface to network better. And that's what you're seeing.
And the integration of AI, Commander.
Yeah, and what's readily available is probably nowhere near what we have operating, but you have to be able to mass produce it. You have to be able to put it out in higher numbers, and until you have tested it and come up with a conclusion. Everything is a compromise when it comes to putting a weapon system online. You have to say to yourself, okay, what are we going with? And then you're going to try to perfect the model that you're in. If you aim for perfection, you're most likely going to land on excellence. You're never going to get perfection. And there's a finite amount of time, money, and resources, and then also the disruptiveness to the rest of the marketplace around you. That's a big part of what goes on here. I think John would agree with me that we probably have other energy sources available, but we're not altering or changing that market until we know we have everything in control to get the most out of that, and we're going to derive everything out of present systems.
All right, I want to touch on that before we get to John's response to that. Does it always? Well, I don't want to use the word always because that means everything. Wait, would it be majority of the time that the military industrial complex has to have usage and figure out what its purpose may be before it trickles down to civilian use?
Oh, absolutely.
John?
Well, okay, I'll piggyback off of that. Okay, the new technology that's going online right now for sure is Zuma class. You're familiar with that, right, Commander? Yeah. That particular ship was built for this, and it was super expensive. So you're right about money. And they actually only built 3. They were going to build like 20 or something like that. But
They're also going to put a hypersonic missile test. They're doing it now, actually.
yeah, but they only built 3 allegedly.
I know. Yeah.
But they're also re-equipping all the aircraft carriers. The Stennis has been delayed for 2 years, and it's not because of supply issues or whatever. That's going to be the first Nimitz class that's going to come out with some of its capabilities, and each one that's refitted afterwards is going to have the capabilities. The Ford, the Kennedy, and then what's the third new one? It's already getting ready to come out. Those are the Ford class. Yeah,
No.
the Ford class already have it. It's the Stennis, when they go back in for refuel, they're getting refit with some of this technology. So this is all being done. I haven't heard yet, but they've been testing it on tanks. So my guess is there'll be a new tank come out here soon.
Well, look at the Valkyrie, the wingman that they're developing. And I'm sure Commander's very familiar with this. It's a drone aircraft, and it's just like a fighter.
Well,
I mean, that's incredible, the technology. And
Trump's tip in his hand. There's 2 things that key to what he said. 3, he made the Space Force the first time around. He's bragging about it. He's talking about the Golden Dome, and he talked about this new fighter that they didn't really want him to talk about. And this new fighter is going to make the F-22, which is the best fighter in the sky anywhere. It's going to make it look like it's going to fly circles around the F-22.
Commander, are you aware of the 47? Any kind of testing going on with that? Are you aware with your background?
No, I'm not. But what I do know is this. There was extensive prototypes flying of these aircraft for the program called NGAD, Next Generation Air Defense Fighter. And that is why they were able to very quickly come up with whatever the winning design is. In fact, if you remember, Padre and I were having a little off-the-show discussion about it because he thought that we would have squadrons of them available ahead of time. I don't think we do. I don't think we've mass-produced the airplane because we have put ourselves into a very difficult position. The other part is you don't want to provoke. And I think the other part that is happening with our president is that he is using the power of the economy to drive our friends and foes into a very hypersensitive state. So why these aircraft are coming out and why these things are, while these aircraft are being produced and other systems like it, we're also driving the fact that the PRC now finds itself in a very, very tight spot because of the tariff business, because of the things that are going on with the economy. What is going on that Europe just came on and the EU just said, look, we know our future lies with the ability to use the U.S. market. We got ourselves into a bad spot on being able to produce. So this is why you see the emphasis on these capabilities coming out. And as John said, Space Force, major importance there that's overlooked. And it makes a lot of griff for other discussions about what the Space Force knows and all the things that go on. I have many friends that talk to me. Space Force knows what happened, in the political and different parts of the stream. I don't see that. What I do see is the ability to have a service that is not shackled to the older methods of how we're going forward and how things are being produced. The other piece that's happening with this advanced technology, as you talked about, the wingman,
The Valkyrie.
the Valkyrie system, but I think they call it Loyal Wingman and some of the other programs.
Yeah, there are others.
It allows you to have 4 or 5 aircraft flying around. I got to tell you, though, from a standpoint, I love the capability. I think it's fantastic. I also think it's an unbelievable logistics headache. And if you are following a lot of stuff, you hear a lot of people talking about that. So now you're going to have 5, 6 aircraft that go. If they don't have them at a price that is acceptable, how do you put enough of those out? Because they could actually be very often one-way missions for the loyal wingmen, because they're going to run them out of fuel. But one aircraft, as John was speaking about, with the type of technology we have right now, causes 4 or 5 aircraft to either act as one or act as 5 to 6 separate agents that are going on.
Wow.
And why do you have to have the human in that? Why don't we have AI doing that? Because the human element is what is going to probably provide the win in these situations. We will do things not based on logic. And if you apply some of the things that we're seeing in this series, where you have the ability to interface at a level that is past what we are looking at right now, like we are looking at this screen tonight, but you have the ability in the brain to have things stimulated to absorb a bunch of other factors. You're quantumizing the human brain experience, what's happening in an environment. That's what I think is going to be the edge. The other thing is this, and for all the folks that are going to drop me the email that I'm a naysayer on unmanned aircraft, I'm not. I just don't think it's a panacea. AI, I think, has limits because it's man-created, if it is. I knew that would get John to crack up. Those parts.
If you watch the series from beginning to end, there's a secret of how much of it's man created and not. So,
well, there you go. There's a little tell for those that are watching the show. But here's the bottom line: anytime the government comes out and says anything, grab your wallet. Literally, as a taxpayer, and figuratively, as anyone listens. I have a friend who absolutely despises the F-35, and he sends me every single article about how the F-35 is outclassed, beaten by every airplane out there. The Chinese have better airplanes, on and on and on. And I crack up every time, because that is exactly what we want people to think. And I'm not overselling anything. What I'm saying is, anytime you can show me an unclassified source, even a classified one can be spoofed intentionally to do that. It's disinformation. And that is as much part. It is the negative side of everything that we're talking about in this series that's being generated on there. And I always use the historical example. Terrain following radar. We had people come back and say that we were further and further behind, that we're having more and more problems with terrain following radar because we wanted the then Soviets to ease up on what they were trying to do in the same realm. When we were actually scoring very, very good capabilities. The same thing happened with the F-117 in stealth. They never gave it out. They never truly told what was happening. And then one day, everybody showed up and said, guess what? You don't have to fly low up anymore. Here's what's going to happen. These magical airplanes are going to fly in between 5 and 20,000 feet, and they're going to take out all the integrated air defense systems. And everyone looked at, come on, what are you talking about? And we had been flying the 117 at that point in very good tactical test, real world applications in places like Nellis and China Lake, Fallon, and the aircraft was actually operating and proving that it could do it. It was so good that they had to put 2 other airplanes in front and back of it so that the radar people knew where they were.
Wow. All right. The reason it's, and you even touched on that just now briefly, Soviet, 1980, Cold War, Poland is under threat. I mean, there is a lot of tension going on globally at that moment when John had his experience. Now, if you haven't seen Chapter 2, you really need to go back and watch it. It's on KGRA's YouTube, Rumble, on X, at Global Radio Live. You really need to check it out because that's really going back to when it all began, Rendlesham. Now, what if, and I'm just saying, and I want to hear, because in the description of this show, global powers are involved, possibly, in this chapter, but it could be something else. Was this some sort of secret test that was being conducted, but then something happened that they were not expecting that occurred at Rendlesham? Like it opened up some kind of time space distortion, which actually affected John himself, because this is something that was like a side effect of what they were testing. So I'll start with you, John. What is your opinion on that?
How much time you got? Okay. Okay. Let's start with these are confirmed facts. Okay. Since the Germans changed the way warfare was fought in the 40s in World War II, and all the stuff that they were working on, that when the empire fell, then the Russians and the United States split the scientists, however it was.
Yep.
And then the ones we got went to Los Alamos. But we can go back before that. The whole Manhattan Project was a con. And what I mean by a con is that when they first were going to develop the bomb, they quickly realized one way to do it. When the first way they thought they were going to make it work didn't work. But they kept the whole division active, and they ran a con off of that while they hid the second group, which is smaller. They even had people drop false information to the Soviets, which they went down the path of creating the bomb that wasn't going to work. So when the real bomb exploded, it was completely different than what the Russians thought we had, and they were behind already. And we were jumping to the next level. So that was where the first real con went down. Even the British and all the other NATO, ended up being NATO countries later, were kept out of it and stuff. But fast forward, these scientists mixed with the British or with the Americans and the Russians. That's when the Cold War started, but it started the deception. So not only did everything that we were working on get started, the same thing went on with the Manhattan Project, but then UFOs started coming into it. You can trace the history of the very same people that are active today were involved way back then. These different scientists and people like Green, Puthoff, and all those guys, they worked on all this stuff during the Cold War. Puthoff ran Stargate. Green was, which by the way, I'll just tell you, Hunter Green is the character, was involved at the Weird Desk, and his main job was exotic technology and what the Soviets were doing. So this has been going on forever. And then the initial cover with the UFO stuff, and it was called UFO Cover-Up Light and all that to fool the Russians, because the Russians were running stuff on us, we were running on them. And then a guy by the name of Colonel Bearden kind of woke the government up to how far the Russians were going, which then led to Stargate and this other stuff, and then NORAD, which is now Space Command. But it goes down the line of Richard Doty was the first counter intel guy that had everything up in arms with what we were doing, what we could do, and playing a game with the Russians and what we had and didn't have. Now, fast forward, Lou Elizondo took his place because I didn't label him as counter intel. He said he was. So this is a cat and mouse game with everything involving exotic technology. And UFOs, now UAPs play a game in it. And it's just like I've said on your show, Commander, that I was on, that missile that they've got now that's we can't stop or they can't stop ours, that involves plasma technology and UAP technology.
Absolutely.
Because it cuts through space and time.
Now,
so this is a game.
So John, when you say that, people conjure, bad word to use, people envision a certain thing when you say that. There is a whole range of space-time disruption that is going on. To an effect, when you cross the international date line, you are disrupting space-time. It's a very weak model. My point is, when people hear that, they don't realize the scale of what we're talking about. And it is all over the range of what is happening and what is going on. So, as you said, the fact that we are developing systems that use this means we have had previous systems. And you think back to reports, you think back to activities that went on. My favorite, the Manta and the TR3 business that went on, and these systems that went on. Well, why didn't they why did they continue? What? Because I'm sure cost, and I meant to bring this up to you guys when we were setting this show up earlier in the week. If someone walked up to me in my 20s before I was married and said, listen, we want you to consider flying an aircraft. It might shorten your life by 2 decades, but this is what it does. Myself and most of the people around me would have ran to go do that. And I think a lot of people who got tapped on the shoulder to do that, that's exactly what happened. That we have had high cost to break these barriers going through. Sacrifices on this. But I got to tell you, there's a certain appeal to folks out there to do that. There's also, if you want to wrap it in any kind of sense of duty or devotion to your country. I'm sitting here with John, and I can't think of anybody quite much higher on that. So I get that. But what I'm saying is, when we say these terms, people go, well, no, it could be on a scale that seems very slight, but it does fit it, and it is a stepping stone, a continually stepping stone that we are experiencing, going through each level to get to further capability.
Yeah, but it's also the right hand.
Absolutely. Oh my
what
God! Yes.
I'm saying is that the stuff that you're talking about was a diversion because the Russians were looking at that. Meanwhile, the next generation was being tested and worked on, and nobody paid attention to that because they were focusing on what we gave up. But in reality, there was a lot more money that was in the black budget that even Rumsfeld admitted before 9/11 existed when he came on the Hill and said, we've got about 7 to 9 trillion we can't account.
Yeah, night of the 10th. No one remembers that.
Yeah. And then now they're saying they're up to 22 trillion. Well, if you go back and do common math, up until this year, the budget way back then was 250 billion. So the amount of money before that budget, and it went up substantially under Bush after 9/11, but it was well around 250 billion. If you took the 10 years before, the entire money of the 10-year budget of the Defense Department didn't match the money they couldn't account for. So there was money coming from somewhere else, which means it was being printed, and it went into the SAP programs. And at the end of the day, that they developed, just like what they're doing with Arrow right now and stuff. They admitted that, which no one even got, and everyone wanted to argue that they were lying about UAPs, UFOs with Salas. They just told the world that they'll test equipment on our troops.
Correct.
And
No
the civilians either.
But that just went right over everybody's head because all they wanted to say was, well, what they said happened couldn't happen, so therefore that they didn't even catch the fact that, never mind, there's plenty of documentation to prove they've done it before. So they do these deceptions, like they may take a program they don't even think it works and bring it out and make everybody thinks it's working, which will throw the Russians and now the Chinese down a different path. Meanwhile, they've got this whole other program going down the road that no one's even paying attention to because all they're focusing on what they know about.
Correct.
But also, there's no reason why they can't go back to something if they come up with some kind of new concept or idea that connects to something else. That doesn't mean they can't reopen what they were working on in the past, correct?
Go ahead, Commander.
Oh, absolutely. We do that all the time. But many times, when you know that there's a flaw, you want your adversary to go down that route. So you sell that route. Yep. And then you sell them the technology with the fatal flaw built into it.
It's like a psyop. Let them spend the money to try to counter that.
Or let them buy the technology that doesn't work, or that you control the technology. And if you think about what John is putting out in this series, it is sort of like the Hezbollah pagers that the Israelis put into. Unbelievably beautiful program on what they were able to do. And they were able to trigger that at a later date remotely with a frequency. No pun intended. No illusion intended. I'm being straight up on this. And I think we're operating at a scale 1,000 times further down the line on that. And we want our adversaries to be worried about that, but also rabid for anything that they can get their hands on.
Now, I don't want to give any, because we're getting a little bit low on time here. I want to talk about a preview of Chapter 3. And this gets more, and we've all seen it in preparation for next week's show, which airs Thursdays at 5:30 p.m. Eastern on KGRA platforms. You just search it, you'll find it. But it gets more specific with this, as you mentioned, Green and Putoff and some of the other individuals. It gets into the scientific aspect of this and some of the procedures that John was undergone during this whole process. And John, were you altered physiologically? Forget about the mental and the emotional. I mean, that's one thing. But was there any changes to maybe DNA, genetic makeup when you encountered this that still exists today, and things are starting to come out more and more as time goes by, memories, everything else in connection to your experience at Rendlesham?
Well, the first part of your question is they claim there was, but I don't have the data. I've got some data that they gave me that says there was, but I don't have the data that they have, Nolan and those guys have, because they did do a test of 100 people that had UAP encounters, and they put it in a database. But of course, we didn't get told what the results were and stuff. And that was a funded project, so the government was looking at it. And as far as the second part, are there memories coming back that I didn't remember from before based off of hypnosis and maybe some memory recall? Sure. But the problem with that is when it takes so many years to bring it back, it causes a problem that people are trying to say that you're adding to the story. So ultimately, read between the lines on this 22-part series. What really is and what isn't. And that's the only way I could do it, because there's a lot of data that supports it. And then the nonfiction book that comes out next will support it even more. But ultimately, yes, there was changes to us, and the government was interested in it. And yes, you can still have memory recall years later. So,
Commander, what about your assessment of Chapter 3?
I loved it. It was the first two built to what this break was. Obviously, I like the physical production of this. I enjoy it. I like the fact that the music. Often, I will not be looking at the screen. I'll have other things going on while I'm getting ready for it. I probably tend to watch a couple of times, but it prepares me for that. And the other part is, John just talked about his next book that's coming out. If you have not picked up Rendlesham Signals from the Threshold, you need to pick that up if you're into this series. It will open more informational and interaction with what you're hearing tonight, what you hear from you and John each week, and what's happening and what's coming next. As soon as I started watching this, I picked it up immediately. I picked the book up again, and I'm reading chapters over again because it laces up. And I'm understanding not only is John really good at this and what he's doing with this, but he's also putting a very important experience in a format that a fairly smooth-brained village idiot like myself up here in Maine can understand and experience and get into. And it's having profound ability to help me interpret some other events that have occurred to myself personally.
But it cuts through the first book. It's actually 4 books total, but the science fiction one's separate from the trilogy. But the first book it's okay. If you're a nuts and bolts ufologist or person, this isn't, you're going to, I wish you'd give it a chance, because it really lays out the government program.
Right.
And where it started and where it's going, and what offices were involved and what people were involved. And it's interesting that the Office of Net Assessment is covered quite a bit in this book, and they just closed it down. They just announced 2 days ago that they closed the office down.
I'm wondering,
And-
John, are you working for Doge? Is that it? You have a part-time gig with Doge? Is that what's
No. It was interesting. The article said they've just cut down our abilities for future warfare.
Right.
They took away a whole thing that would help us for going forward. That's what net assessment was. So I don't believe it's shut down. I just
absolutely
believe
not.
they've changed the name of it. And probably I'm not going to sit there and say for sure, but I know that no one knew about it until it came in this book. And I've got outstanding FOIA with them right now, but they can just politely come back and say the office no longer exists. So therefore they know the data is no longer there. So that this whole area of the net assessment was completely run by Andy Marshall until he died. And his whole job was the future.
Right.
And his nickname was Yoda. And all the advanced technology that you've talked about that we know about had something to do with him in his office.
Mm.
And now they just shut it down when we're going into the future. So they didn't want that office to be known. And so now they quietly shut it down. So, or moved it. So that's an interesting concept to me alone, let alone trying to understand there's an intricacy up to this. It's just not a nuts and bolts UFO coming from Zeta Reticuli and coming down. It involves everything around it, what it could be, what they may or may not know, why they're studying it, where it could go, and where this could be going. And all they care about is they hope the public argues about whether there's little green men or not, or reptilians, or all this other stuff. And that's the counter intel right there. They've got people chasing their tail on stuff that's not pertaining anything to what they're really doing. And then it goes further with consciousness itself, and we could touch on that real fast. Maybe the commander can add to this. One of the things they're trying to do when they say they're going to take the pilot out of the craft is the only way they could do that is if they were able to take human consciousness and put it into the craft with the AI.
It sounds like a Clint Eastwood movie.
Yeah.
You remember that movie?
Yeah.
Talking about Firefox?
Yeah, Firefox, yeah.
Yeah, but Firefox was just, they could read mentally. That's how he was able to maneuver under high G.
Right.
But that's the new 35 helmet.
But remember, you must think in Russian.
Yes.
Yeah, that was funny.
Please don't even bring up movies like that.
No, but
With a loser like me, I mean, I could probably show you the Clint Eastwood, Craig Thomas cover of the book if you gave me enough time. I could probably.
Yeah, I know they always do that, but the movie that's closest to where we were and where we're going is the movie called The Final Countdown.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Movie.
And the kicker is everybody missed this. Most people did at the end. The final scene was just beautiful, where when they come back, the guy they left behind was now sitting there in a limo with the lady they left behind, and the dog jumped in the limo. And he was they were implying that he was the reason why that carrier existed in the first place.
Right, because they love their dog.
Yeah. But do you remember the scene when they couldn't even communicate?
Yeah.
They had no idea how to get to Pearl back with the communication systems that they had currently. They had no way. They finally figured it out. But it just shows you that was only 40 years.
Yeah.
And was that an accidental entry into the portal, or was it on purpose?
It was probably created by the nuclear ship itself.
But what I'm getting at is you have a person on board that ship who's a naval historical buff that goes back and is able because at that point and thereafter, that's when we have our incredible breakthroughs in codes and stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a masterful movie that does not get anywhere the tell that it should. I mean, it doesn't get that.
Not only that, but the guy the ship waited 2 days before it could leave. It left late because he wanted this guy who was going to take the company over to understand. And last but not least, you remember when the senator he called it Department of Defense. He goes, oh no, never mind the War Department. So it was just hilarious. But people just they were telling us a story back in 1980, how far and where we possibly could have gone
And
with that movie.
I think movies like that and shows like
Philadelphia
that,
experiment. Philadelphia experiment.
I think they're done to measure people's reactions and see what people react and catch the message. Who locks into the frequency, who gets into the deeper message, who reacts to it.
Right, but not only that, but guess who drove that movie? The Office of Net Assessment and the think tanks that were involved with it.
Now that I did not know.
Neither did I.
Well, I didn't know this either, that how much these think tanks control our TV.
Well,
okay, all this sci-fi.
Obviously, you didn't watch enough X-Files.
Well, yeah, but we actually found, it was funny. I'll tell you guys a quick story. It was funny, all right? For a while, there was a huge debate with me, Putoff, Davis, and all these guys. And I was looking at the classified papers and I was talking to them. And one of the things that James Worrell and I found was that we found a lot of evidence of these different think tanks, including NASA, that 10 to 20 years before technology actually started coming known to the public, these think tanks were talking about it, and then there were shows done on it. And what we found was these think tanks influenced these shows. Now, there was a particular NASA paper that I found, and I sent it to Putoff, and I always got the brush off when he didn't want to talk about something. He put somebody else to talk about it. So by this time, I had a large audience. Valet, Putoff, Knapp, all these guys were in on this, Davis. And he was puffing his chest like he likes to do. And he goes, where the heck did you get this conspiracy-based BS? And because I just took a paragraph out of the NASA stuff. I says, well, Eric, I said, I'm glad you asked, because it came from this declassified paper from NASA. And I just embarrassed the shit out of him in front of everybody. And he came back about 2 minutes later, because this was going back and forth. He says, oh, yeah, okay, you're right. Yeah, I know the people were involved in that project. And you're right, it's real. But even he was trying to spin what I gave him as conspiracy, when in reality, once I produced proof it wasn't, he didn't know how to handle it. So you've got to go back and look at this stuff, because these think tanks are controlling everybody, like you said, Commander, on getting us ready for what's coming next. And I do believe, because it's interesting now that the Vice President, Tulsi Gabbard, a couple other people were talking about this, including Javi Loeb now says there may be something coming towards us, which doesn't seem to get much effect right now. But all these people are talking about there's more to this. They're conditioning for us for something. This is more than just because you can only do this so often before you lose your cred. And for the Vice President to come out 2 days ago and say, he's very interested in this, and he's been busy with other things, and he's going to start taking this seriously. And Tulsi said she did that interview, said there's a lot more to this that we're going to have to get to. That it's interesting that it appears there's something on the horizon, that may be coming out here sooner or later.
And they're preparing.
Yeah, they're preparing us for it. Just like the latest shows. A couple of these new shows coming out are going to rock your world.
Well, gentlemen, we're coming to the close of tonight, but I want to share a promotion for this show that we've posted on numerous social media.
Before we close, Bill, can I say one more thing?
No, go ahead.
Commander has got a serious background in the military, and I'm glad he realizes where I'm going with this, and I'm thankful for that. And I welcome anybody, I don't care who it is, but military especially, I would love them to get more feedback from them, not based on maybe a misnomer with the uniform or something like that,
right?
But the overall effect that I'm talking about, and if they've had any experiences themselves and would be open to talking about it or, adding to it. Because, folks, this is, no matter what you look at, this is what we're facing. The future, and from this 22-part series, is where we're going to be here sooner than you realize.
And
That's-
boy, is chapter 22 something that is like mine. Wow. Because
And you forgot to ask me about the underground stuff, Bill. Remember?
yeah, but no. That comes for when we review it next week. Because that's
No, you wanted to do it this week. You said you wanted to ask about in this. Okay, we'll wait till next week. That's
yeah. Let's wait till next week because that actually is connected to chapter 3.
okay.
So one closing comment from me. It's
ahead.
a real honor to be asked by both of you to come on the show. Anytime I can and you ask, I will do everything I can to join.
We'd love to have you every week you come
Absolutely.
in. Yeah.
We got
Yeah.
what is it now? We still got the 3 coming up this Thursday, so we've got at least 20 more to do like this coming up.
Yes. So
I know you're
and
busy doing a lot of things, but
I
come
would
and
really love in our chat room, Roth and Kathleen to drop me a line. They're always in the shows that I'm on. They're in UAP. They're with this. I'd love to hear from them direct on the email. And it was a real honor to join you tonight.
Thanks for coming on. It was an honor for us.
Yes. Before we close, I'm just going to play this little clip, and then we'll come back briefly, and then we'll wrap. But this gives you an overall synopsis of what's going to be going on with this 20.
And kudos to Keith for putting this together.
Absolutely. All right, so let's just run. It's only like a minute long.
This isn't about ships or stars.
They erased what I saw, but not what I became. They passed it on.
It's not from there, it's not from here. It's the voice we lost to fear.
22 chapters, one signal. The truth was buried. Now it's waking up.
Veritas Obscura.
There it is.
Bingo.
Gentlemen, it was a pleasure being here with both.
That gave me goosebumps.
Right? And again, thank you both for your service and the sacrifices you made and your families. On behalf of everyone watching, I'm sure we all want to thank you for that. And Commander will be on with us on Thursday's episode, chapter 3. So tune into that Thursday, 5:30 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss it.
And Bill, thanks for hosting it. And folks, spread the word. It's only going to get better. I promise.
Amen to that. Amen.
All right, everyone. On behalf of John and Commander, everyone have a great night. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you Thursday. So till then, we're out of here.